Please, much more. Please, much more. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Adesina. I have to take 1 minute pause just to digest. But I need longer than that. Ladies and gentlemen, I said two things. Listening to Dr. Adesina, there are two things that come to mind. First and foremost, a leader, whether of a country or an institution, must espouse 4 eyes of leadership. That leader must inspire, must influence, must impact, but overall must lead with integrity. Is that correct? Yes. Finally, a leader is not about a title. I'm a president, I'm a member of parliament, I'm a senator, I'm XYZ, I'm an MCA. A leader must not only carry the bag of leadership, but also must remember to carry the baggage of leadership. The bag is the position. The baggage is what you do with that position. Today, listening to Dr. Adesina, it is quite clear that he not only carried the bag of leadership, but the baggage, because the projects that he has implemented through the bank in the continent have been impactful, they have inspired, and they have influenced, but they have been done with integrity. Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina. Thank you very much. Just to confirm that the Law Society is represented in the bank through myself as the chair of one of the tribunals that foster transparency in the bank. I'm going to allow a couple of questions and comments, but please make sure you just have 1 bite. Don't have 2 bites. 1 question, and we'll do this in 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll close. The first person, my eyes have taken me down there. Microphones, please just put them across every row so that then we can conclude this exercise expeditiously.
Good afternoon, Atari. My name is Muyesu from Turkana, a part of this country. Just comment. I associate myself with the observations of Professor Francis Oyama, Daron Akimoglu, and Dr. Clark Nason, all of which say that socio-economic development is a precursor to a strong liberal democracy, and not the other way around. In other words, in the absence of good, strong socio-economic development, we cannot have a thriving liberal democracy. And part reason why our democracy struggles in this age is because of the fact that we remain undeveloped, we are highly stratified, we are highly differentiated. Ours is a rural agrarian economy, and we are not very exposed. So, do you agree with those observations? And if at all, I think it's perhaps time you let many of our scholars here understand that it is development first and then democracy, and the other way around. We are here because I put the horse before the cart.
Thank you.
For the horse. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. Next to you there.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. But I was very much stressed by your last slide, where a dollar was lying on the continent of Africa. In that, question is very simple. How can we de-dollarize the economies of Africa?
Thank you. Thank you. Next. We take 5 and then 5. Yes, there and then here. Yeah. Down back there and then here. Ogada, the next one will be that one. Yeah, please proceed.
My name is Akinwumi, and thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Listening very carefully. I've seen that the vision for the African Development Bank for the next 10 years is a prosperous, resilient, and integrated Africa. I've seen that the bank 54 African states as members. And we have seen through the presentation all the efforts that the bank has undertaken to help rule of law in those two countries. My question is this. What efforts is the bank privy of or undertaking to help regional integration across Africa with the aim of perhaps one day having a common market in Africa and perhaps even a single currency like the euro, because obviously the advantages of such a union of the economies and currency are evident for all to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Salma Ochieng. Allow me to call you Your Excellency by all standards. And looking at your resume, your very, very rich resume. And I believe as the African Development Bank, you have a CSR component within the bank. And today you are addressing advocates. And we seated here, the bare minimum qualification that we have is a degree, an LLB degree. And I am keen at mentorship of the young lawyers. You have talked and addressed the issues of AI that we cannot run away from in the recent times that we are in. And then in the expansion of the practice across the board. Under the bank's CSR, are there exchange programs curtailed specifically for advocates or the young upcoming advocates who are looking up to you and who will one day want to say that, I got this because of courtesy of the African
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's do this. We'll take 5 more, then we close, right?
Yes.
Is that democracy?
Yes.
Now it's only this I say yes. Will we take 5 and we close?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
Thank you very much, our presenter. My name is Faith Waigwa. One concern about development partners financing African governments is on an issue of public procurement. So the financing agreement, which is between AFDB and the government of Kenya, is governed perhaps by regulations or laws that will govern an international space. However, when you escalate that downwards, where that financing is supposed to identify a contractor, and that contractor then performs the works, goods, and services that are required out of the financing, we see a situation where the laws of Kenya or the laws of the African countries are then side-tracked or set aside so that the bank itself ends up getting involved in getting the contractor. And what I'm concerned about is, once you finance as a bank, it is done in dollars. Then the contractor is a foreigner who operates from outside the country perhaps. And again, they're going to be paid by dollars. And they're going to be paid in an account that is outside the country. So the only benefit Kenyans get is that product, like the road. But the circulation of the money is outside. So that's my concern in terms of procurement. Why don't you allow them, all procurements, as long as they are Kenyan procurements, be governed by the procurement laws
Thank you.
of Kenya?
Thank you. Dr. Kimwana, Professor Kimwana, I think I've seen his hand up. Professor Kimwana, former Governor of makwiny. I chaired the commission in the county when the county government was being dissolved. and I ordered resolution. Yes, Professor.
I want to say, first of all, thank you, because Toake was one of the ADB projects. Thank you for that. It's ongoing. But the question is, listening to you, and this is not the first time to listen to you, you actually speak as if you are doing what the African Union should be doing. And so the direct question is, how do you influence, through all what you have told us, these 54 governments to, accede to rule of law, to constitutionalism, to those good practices, so that you are also supplying soft infrastructure, not just hard infrastructure? Thank you very much, and we wish you well.
Thank you so much. We are very impressed by the presentation. My question is about the sovereign debt. Is it a preserve of the executive when procuring these sovereign debts? And what is the bank doing to expand the involvement of the people and the information regarding sovereign debt? Because in this country, sovereign debt is only, in my view, an exclusive of the executive.
That one I can answer. I chair a tribunal that facilitates access to information. But I'm sure Doctor will have a say on it.
Thank you. My name is Faith Bessa from the Public-Private Partnership Directorate. And I just wanted to compliment Dr. Adesina. And just mine is a compliment that indeed we are working well with the African Legal Support Facility. And we want to assure you that by the end of this financial year, we are working with the Office of the Attorney General to ratify the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senior Counsel Kandiyama, then we...
Thank you, Dr. Adesina, for a wonderful presentation. There is an inherent paradox in this idea of development in African countries, where to attract the foreign countries we insist on sanctity of contract, and capital defines the dispute resolution clause. It defines where they are going to determine any dispute about the contract. And our countries, when they are looking for this lending, they are ready. Our institutions are ready to sign above the dotted line with those dispute resolution contracts. And you've talked about asymmetrical bargaining power. But on the other hand, there is a question of odious debt. Once they have signed with this asymmetrical bargaining power, without the people in those countries, including in Kenya, being very aware of the content of these financing agreements, when eventually it is the time to pay, it is a taxpayer who is now required to pay. So you have indicated that the African Development Bank has been involved in the negotiation of some of these odious debts. Could you tell us what is your experience with trying to develop a legal principle that odious debt, whether it is sovereign or it is by institutions within a country, that goes against the principles of fairness, that is infected by serious corruption, shall not be payable? Could you tell us what has been the
Thank you, Senator.
outcome?
Thank you. So one more, then we close. All right? Yeah, back there.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Director Moringi, Chair of Council.
Okay, Chairman. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Former Governor also.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Mr. President, you've referred to credit rating several times in your speech. And of course, there is the data from UNDP showing that Africa could be paying as much as $75 billion more per year because we are poorly rated. And the blame going perhaps to Western-based rating agencies. So the more direct question, of course, is what could the bank do? What is the bank doing to build credit rating in Africa, by Africans, on its own merit?
Thank you. Thank you. Last one.
Thank you so much, Senior and Mr. President, for that, in my view, very thought-provoking presentation. Two questions. I think we all agree that...
I only agreed one, so stick to one. Proceed.
Democracy is a work in progress in Africa, and sometimes it has failed. But my question is, what are we doing to realize the dream of the likes of Muammar Gaddafi, that is, use our mineral resources to back up one currency for Africa? Other jurisdictions have done it, and I think in a way it has led to their development. What are we doing? And should we continue to work with institutions such as the World Bank and EMF that we know have been predatory in nature and have benefited from our resources? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina. The stage is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the last question, and I work my way up on the issue of natural resources and what you were saying about backing currencies. And I want to say about two different things about this. First, I don't believe in natural resource-backed loans, because a lot of natural resource-backed loans that you have in Africa are actually quite non-transparent, they're not inclusive, you don't know what the terms are. Countries negotiate off things that are not necessarily in their own interest. And sometimes you have a country, for example, uses their oil, your gas, your minerals, your metals to back a particular loan, and then you're still paying 8, 9, 10% interest as a sovereign, when actually the sovereign cannot default. And so what is the point of that? In some cases, you set up a special purpose vehicle that you give your oil to, and the oil prices go up, they make the money, you don't. And so all I just want to say is that we have to be very careful with natural resource-backed loans. In most cases, they are very non-transparent, and they are not very inclusive, and they are not necessarily in the interest of the countries. And if I might just make a comment here about the issue that is with us today with respect to what you get with carbon pricing. And so you have a situation today where a lot of countries want to do carbon offsets. And so they come to Africa and they take over vast amount of lands in Africa. Now, if you wanted to do a carbon offset, for example, and you are say in Europe, the emission trading standard is such that if you have to get to Africa, you know what it is? It can go between $1 and $3 per ton. And so you have a lot of countries that have come to Africa that are buying up vast amounts of land. So for those of you that will remember in 2008, where we had the global food crisis, there were some countries that were taking over land to grow food for their countries out of Africa and export it back. So it was all called a land grab situation. So I do think what we have today is carbon grab situation because of lack of proper information. Secondly, the price is nothing, so we're getting nothing. Second is that the countries lose the right over their own land, so you're losing your sovereignty over their lands. Third, under environmental law globally, you can no longer use the carbon under that land as part of your own independently determined national contributions on that COP agreement. You can't, because it no longer belongs to you. And finally, as an economist, the way you measure the wealth of nations is done by GDP, the value of goods and services that an economy produces. But who says that's the right measure? Because it doesn't tell you anything about the negative externalities of that production process. And so others are getting very rich, and we are paying the consequence in terms of climate change, right? Now, what I want to say about this particular issue is that we are wealthy in terms of carbon, forest, biodiversity. Take the for example, the Congo Basin area is the second largest carbon launch in the world after the Amazon. And so what does Africa get from that? Nothing. We just get applause for helping to sequester carbon and all that. Look, Africa cannot afford to be greenly poor. Africa has to be greenly rich. And therefore, that's why I have championed globally that the GDP of nations in Africa should be redone to take into consideration the natural capital of wealth of Africa, including that in your GDP as a green GDP, whether it's the value of your forest, your biodiversity, the value of all the other natural assets that you have. So your debt to GDP ratio, which is a measure of whether your debt is sustainable or not, goes down. And therefore, you can actually borrow more to do more. And so, you know, Africa cannot be green rich and cash poor. It's point I made. You know, and so this issue is very important. We are already working on it. We are training and supporting African statistical bureaus to begin to have new tools and ways in which they can recompute the GDP of Africa, taking into consideration the natural capital stock that we have. So that's my point with regard to the issue. And so if that happens, your currencies will become much stronger, actually, because you have a lot more wealth as a nation. Now, the other one about the debt credit rating agency, I think it's from the governor or somebody. Yeah. Yeah, from which? From the chief taxman. Oh, chief taxman. So, there is no doubt that there is risk, but I think that when it comes to Africa, it's more of risk, a lot more of risk perception than the real risk of investing in Africa. Don't believe me, believe the data. Now, Moody's Analytics did an assessment of the default on infrastructure in Africa, all over the world, over the last 14 years, in a 14-year period. What did they find? The default rate on infrastructure debt in Africa is 1.9%. The default rate in North America is 6.6%. The one in Latin America is 10.4%. In Eastern Europe is 12.5 or so percent. Western Europe and Western Asia about 4.4%. So what does that mean? That means that the default in Africa is not that high at all. And that is the data. It's not just about perception. But then, when you look at the cost of capital, the African countries, to raise capital is 3 to 5 times higher than in the areas they actually have higher default rates. So you take two countries, one in Latin America, one in Africa, both of them the same credit rating by the same credit rating agency. BB rating, the one in Africa raises the cost of capital by 300 basis points higher than the one in Latin America. Why? That is not backed by data. And so that is why we have been saying, what you point to raise about the UNDP data, that in fact, if you considered the African countries rated properly, they will not be paying back $75 billion that you are talking about in terms of excess debt payment. So I firmly believe that the global credit rating agencies need to begin to have better data, better persons, evaluate us better based on not just your opinion, but have a counterfactual. So if you go to a medical doctor to have a scan or something, that doctor, you have a right to a second opinion, right? To go to somebody else and ask them, is that what they say, is that correct? But African countries don't have a second opinion. And so that is why at the African Development Bank, I have championed, and I continue to push at the African Union for us to have an African credit rating agency, not a political institution, but a globally respected African rating agencies that will look at your market risk, your project risk, your political risk, counterparty risk, and all this risk, and assess you properly. And of course, That doesn't mean that all the global investors are suddenly going to be using the Africa Credit Rating Agency, but at least it gives you a comparison, right, of data points that they can be used between all those. So the simple point to your point is that we strongly support the establishment of the Africa Credit Rating Agency. President Ruto told me something about ratings. When there was a military coup in Nigeria Republic, he told me that Kenya's debt in terms of coupon payments went up. And when they asked them why, President Ruto said, we told them that this is Kenya. They said it's because of the coup in Niger. And they're going to pay, I think, 200 basis points more. And he said, the last time I checked in Kenya, Niger is not inside of Kenya. It's not even close to Kenya. That's how some of the rating agencies actually look at it. Once there is an event, it becomes something that's normalized all across the whole country. So that's the point I'm basically making there. On the issue of the dispute resolution and the asymmetry of bargaining power and odious debt and all of that, I think at the end of the day, the issue is making sure that debt is contracted transparently and that you negotiate what's actually in your own interest. And the point of the contract, I think the question came from here. I can see it. Yeah, okay. So the whole issue about the legal principles around this odious debt should not be paid. Well, if you get into a contract that you shouldn't get into a contract, why did you do it in the first place? So I think nations should take proper legal advice. And this is why I was making the case to you that you ought to be involved in your nations about the contractual obligations the nations are getting involved with, to be sure that the rates are in your interest. Those things actually, and where the resolution, the dispute will be settled. Why is it always being done in France for the Francophone countries? Why is it always being done in the UK? Why is it always being done in New York? Why not in Africa? So that's why in my talk I was encouraging that we strengthen our arbitral systems so that many of these things can also be done right here back in our country. Faith, thank you very much. In terms of African Legal Support Facility, I think you were somewhere there. Thank you for the ratification of that agreement. We're grateful for that. On the sovereign debt, the role of the people. Well, I think my talk is very clear about that. National debt is not something to be contracted without consultation, because you are going to pay for it with your taxes today and well into the future. So there must be a process of prioritization, a process of consultation, a process that actually shows the people how the money is going to be used. You can't just be taking loan anyhow. How is it being used? How has it been used? Who's going to be accountable for that? How much are we going to pay? And what's the implication of that on taxes when you actually get too much debt that is not sustainable? So we shouldn't be just saying we are taking debt. That's one thing. But personally, I don't believe nations can develop just like that. And neither should they be. Nations should develop by the discipline of investments. We have a lot of investments. We have a lot of assets. The issue is how do we interface global capital to unlock those assets for us? And how do we manage our assets? I think it's important, and when it comes to domestic resource mobilization, which is actually very, very important, tax to GDP ratio is what the IMF will tell you. Your tax to GDP ratio should be above 15%, and then you will grow. Well, here's the point. It's not the number. It's the tax administration. It's how the money actually gets used. We tend to tax people a lot because we think the nominal tax rates are quite low. But the other side of that is that tax are social contracts between people, citizens, and their societies. So if I am providing my own electricity, I'm digging a borehole, which in fact by its nature is an indication of market failure. And so I don't know why politicians always get videos to go show that they're digging boreholes. If I'm providing my own security and everything, well, I am a local government. And so essentially what I'm saying is that government's failure or government inefficiencies in the provision of public services transfers the responsibility of the government to the citizens who now bear the higher cost. So it's not just your nominal tax rate, it is the implicit tax rate. That is taxes that citizens are paying that's not reflected. So the citizens are paying a lot more than they should be paying. So the point I want to say is that don't just collect taxes, you have to make sure taxes are used well to deliver what is a social contract with society. That's my view on this particular issue. On the AUC, well, I just checked out the comment. We work very closely with the AUC. I think the soft infrastructure point you raised is important. Now, I'll tell you one thing about the bank. When I was elected president of the bank in 2015, I said, the bank is an institution set up to go mobilize capital for Africa's development. We have Agenda 2063. And that Agenda 2063 is going to be, it's in the future. But we have to have a high discount rate to bring many things to the present. And so I set up what's called the I5s of the bank. Light up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. And I align that completely with Agenda 2063 of the African Union to fast track that Agenda 2063. You know what has happened? In 10 years, those high fives impacted on the lives of 565 million people. From electricity to water to sanitation to agriculture to transport and all of that. So all I'm saying is that there's full alignment between us and the African Union. We must fast track the Agenda 2063. Everything good for Africa should not be in the future. It has to bring things faster for our population. On the issue of procurement, I think that Faith you raised, actually it's the opposite of everything you said. Because we actually do not select companies, contractors. No. We use national systems, procurement systems. There are two types of procurement systems we use. Your point is a good one, but we don't do that. We have an international procurement systems which we have to open up globally. If you're taking particular things from a fund, which we call the African Development Fund, so it's always globally competitive. Now we also have particular things that are done at the country level. But regardless of the two, it's not the bank that chooses the contractor, it is you. We follow and we use the national procurement laws. In fact, the bank does not get involved in picking contractors at all. So if you have contractors that are not performing, you should actually go deal with them, not the African Development Bank. We don't get involved in that. And so we respect national laws, national procurement laws, and that is how all contracts in the bank are actually done, not from the African Development. Just for clarity, it's not from the bank. But having said that, I think there's always issues faced about the issue of competitiveness. Sometimes if you use least cost procurement system, contractors of a particular country normally tends to get most of it. The question that is being raised is it enough just to talk about least cost procurement systems as opposed to life cycle cost? You know, if I have a least cost and it's a bad infrastructure, I still have to repair that infrastructure over time. So now we are having a conversation globally about whether we should shift from least cost production and procurement system to a full cost life cycle model for looking at procurement. So that's just for clarification, but it's a good point you raised. Yeah. Salma, I think on CSR, we were talking about mentorship. We have a program at the bank that is called Young Professional Programs. So if you want to join the Young Professional Program, the qualifications are as follows. You must have been working for 3 years. It's a great program. If you want to have an entry position at the bank, you can apply to the bank, and it's a competitive process. To get into that, you can actually get into the bank. And we have a number of young lawyers that are actually part of the young professional programs for the bank. So Faith, please see me or one of my staff while I walk out, and I'll be happy to connect you with those that can support you with that. But, you know, young lawyers are like young doctors or doctors. When they go to court and they see learned friends, learned seniors like you, go to court, you've argued everything right, and yet you keep losing cases. Then they ask themselves, are they in the right profession? Why are they in Africa? Maybe they should go somewhere else. All I'm trying to say is that we cannot be letting our young brains just go outside of the continent just because we are not cleaning up our own systems. On the issue of regional integration, I was asked, what are we doing on regional integration? Yes, we support the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In the last 10 years, we've done about, is that the question over there? Regional integration question? Oh, I thought you would have. Oh, right over there, okay, at the back. We support the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In the last 10 years, we've done about more than $6.5 billion on integration infrastructure. That goes from power, it goes to highways, corridors, digital infrastructure, and all of that. That's one. Second, as I mentioned to you, let me give some examples. In East Africa, we are supporting the standard gauge rail that links Tanzania to DRC to Burundi. And that's about $3.5 billion that we're mobilizing capital for. That helps in regional integration. We're supporting ports, rail, airports. I just mentioned the case of Ethiopia to you. So these are all on regional integration. We are also supporting the laws of lines of credit, trade lines of credit for banks. We are also strongly supporting the development of capital markets across many countries by integrating the stock exchanges so that capital can flow, people can raise capital all across Africa. These are all part of it. So regional integration is at the core of what the African Development Bank does. On the issue of the dollars on the currencies for Africa, well, three things I would say. First, I personally do not believe that African countries should be developing or too dependent on aid. You see, if you have a walking stick and you're walking on it, and the walking stick keeps getting shorter and shorter, you keep moving forward. But that's not because you're making progress. You're about to fall. You cannot take aid and put it on your balance sheet. Why should benevolence is good, or benevolence is not an asset class, and why should that be on your balance sheet? If a country decides they don't want to do aid, well, so be it. Will you not develop without it? So I do believe that Africa should develop with pride. Africans should mobilize a lot more capital by themselves. They should use their resources more efficiently, and therefore you are not subject to conditionalities and whims and caprices of people, or you can develop without having to depend on aid. The second thing I want to say is the importance of the African Economic Monetary Union, which we are working on with the African Union on this particular area. So the more you build regional trade, the more you are able to have better currencies, the more you can actually also trade in your local currencies that are much stronger on that. The first question was on the issue of socioeconomic development. Is that Muyesu? Yeah. On the issue of socioeconomic development, whether it's development first or democracy first, whatever the theory is that you were saying. Well, let me say this. There is no development without a government. And I believe firmly that we've gotten it wrong by thinking government is a problem. Government is not the problem. Bad governance is the problem. Government, in my view, can play a very critical role of a market maker. There are so many missing institutions, market failure problems that governments can compensate. Why is it that governments work elsewhere and not in a number of countries that I do not necessarily want to say? So all I want to say is that we need good government, accountable government, responsible government, zero corruption, make our continent, our countries a place that capital can move to, that capital can stay, that capital can grow because they trust that we're going to do the right things. I close with this. And we're having dinner yesterday with Honorable Justice and others, having a great debate, and Prof was there also with us in that debate. And one thing that I said was about the role of public service, the public sector. You know, the public sector, private capital will always move to where the rate of return on private capital is highest. That's standard. But that's a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition. The necessary and sufficient condition for private capital to move is that private capital will move always to where the social capital stocks are high. Let me be clear. Social capital stocks, health, water, sanitation, education, social security, good infrastructure. Why do people take money out of Africa and go and put it in Switzerland? The rate of return that they are getting is negative, but people like to live there. So the point I'm making is that it's not just putting money in Africa. Let's make Africa a place where the owners of capital want to live. Where you know you are making progress is when those that own capital come to you to live there. And so we must make sure our public services are delivering quality. They move people from the private sector, they hire them and put them in the public sector. And they pay them more than they're actually getting from the private sector. Why? Because they value the social capital stock of their country. So all I just want to say is that the problem is never government. It's bad government that is the problem. What we should be doing is turning our government into a market maker. That's how you will get faster development. Thank you very much.
I was conversing with a friend of mine sitting in here, and the conversation was that this was a master class, wasn't it? Yes. It was a master class, isn't it? Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Adesina. I think it's not within my mandate